The sound of dreams. The auditorium was quiet, except for the soft hum of stage lights overhead. In the center of the room, 4 judges sat behind a long wooden table, their hands folded, their expressions calm but curious. They had seen many performers today. Singers who reached for impossible notes. Dancers who moved like water. Comedians who filled the room with laughter. But now, as the afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, they waited for something different. Behind the heavy curtain at the side of the stage, a young man stood alone. His name was Miguel Santos, and he was 23 years old. He wore a simple black shirt and jeans, nothing fancy, nothing meant to catch attention. In his hands, he held a small drum called a tabla. The drum was beautiful, made of wood and stretched leather, decorated with intricate patterns that his grandmother had painted years ago. Miguel ran his fingers across its surface, feeling the familiar grooves and bumps. This tabla had been with him since he was a boy. Miguel closed his eyes and took a slow breath. His heart was beating fast, but not from fear. It was excitement mixed with something deeper. Something that felt like hope. He thought about his journey here, to this stage, to this moment. He thought about the streets of Manila where he grew up, where music spilled out of every doorway and window. He thought about his grandmother, who had given him this tabla when he was only 7 years old, telling him that music was not just sound, but a language that could speak when words failed. A voice called his name from somewhere beyond the curtain. It was time. Miguel walked onto the stage. The lights were brighter than he expected, warm against his face. He could see the judges now, 3 men and 1 woman, all watching him with polite interest. The audience behind them was a sea of faces, some smiling, some neutral, all waiting. Miguel walked to the center of the stage and sat down cross-legged on the floor. He placed the tabla in front of him, his hands resting gently on its surface. One of the judges, a man with gray hair and kind eyes named David, leaned forward slightly. "Welcome," he said, his voice carrying easily across the quiet room. "What's your name, and what will you be doing for us today?" Miguel looked up and smiled. It was a gentle smile, not too big, not forced. "My name is Miguel Santos," he said. His accent was clear, his English careful and practiced. "I am from the Philippines. Today, I want to share something with you. Something that is hard to explain with words alone." The judges exchanged glances. Another judge, a woman named Jennifer with bright red glasses, tilted her head. "We're listening," she said warmly. Miguel nodded. He positioned his hands on the tabla, feeling its weight, its presence. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched out, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes before something important begins. Then, softly, Miguel began to play. His fingers moved across the tabla with practiced ease, creating a rhythm that was steady and hypnotic. The sound filled the auditorium, not loud, but clear. Each beat was precise, each pause intentional. The rhythm was complex, layered, the kind that made you want to close your eyes and let it wash over you. Some in the audience began to nod their heads slightly, unconsciously moving with the beat. The judges watched, impressed but not yet surprised. They had seen skilled percussionists before. But then, something changed. Miguel's mouth opened, and words began to flow. Not singing, rapping. His voice moved with the rhythm of the tabla, weaving in and out of the beats like thread through fabric. The words were in English, clear and crisp, telling a story about growing up in a small neighborhood where music was everywhere but opportunities were nowhere. His flow was smooth, confident, his breath control remarkable. He never stumbled, never missed a beat with either his hands or his voice. Jennifer's eyes widened. David sat up straighter. The other 2 judges leaned in, their expressions shifting from polite interest to genuine attention. But Miguel was not finished. As he continued to rap, his voice began to shift. The words started to blend with melody, and suddenly he was not just rapping anymore. He was singing. His voice lifted and fell, carrying a tune that was both haunting and beautiful. It was a melody that spoke of longing, of distance, of missing home. And all the while, his hands never stopped moving on the tabla. The rhythm continued, steady and sure, providing the foundation for everything else. The auditorium seemed to hold its breath. People in the audience stopped moving. Some leaned forward in their seats. Others covered their mouths with their hands, their eyes wide with wonder. Because what they were witnessing was not just one talent, but three talents happening at the same time, flowing together like a river. Miguel rapped about his grandmother, the woman who had believed in him when no one else did. He sang about the nights he spent practicing in their tiny apartment, trying to master the tabla while his friends played basketball outside. His hands created rhythms that grew more complex, more intricate, patterns within patterns, but his voice never wavered. He controlled everything with a calm focus that made it look effortless, even though everyone watching knew it was anything but. The problem Miguel had faced all his life was simple but heavy. People always wanted him to choose. Choose to be a rapper or a singer. Choose traditional music or modern music. Choose his culture or the wider world. No one believed that all these pieces could exist together in one person, in one performance. They said it was too much, too complicated, that audiences would not understand. But as Miguel sat on that stage, doing the impossible, he proved something different. He proved that he did not have to choose. He proved that complexity was not confusion. He proved that honoring where you come from while reaching for where you want to go was not only possible, it was beautiful. The song built to a crescendo. Miguel's voice rose higher, carrying a long, clear note that seemed to fill every corner of the auditorium. His hands moved faster on the tabla, creating a rolling thunder of rhythm. Then, with perfect timing, everything came to a stop. The last note hung in the air. His hands rested still on the drum. Silence. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the auditorium exploded with sound. The audience rose to their feet, applauding, cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. The judges stood as well, clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Jennifer had her hands pressed to her chest, her eyes shining. David was shaking his head in amazement, a huge smile on his face. Miguel slowly stood up, holding his tabla carefully. He bowed slightly, humble despite the overwhelming response. His heart was pounding now, but it was a different kind of pounding. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for who he really was. David was the first judge to speak. He had to raise his voice slightly to be heard over the continuing applause. Miguel, he said, I have been doing this for 15 years. I have seen thousands of performers. But I have never, and I mean never, seen anyone do what you just did. That was not just talent. That was art. That was truth. Jennifer nodded vigorously. You brought your whole self to this stage, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You did not hide any part of who you are. You showed us that different pieces of culture and music and expression can not only coexist, they can create something entirely new and entirely breathtaking. The other judges added their praise, each one speaking of different technical aspects they had noticed, different moments that had moved them. But Miguel barely heard the specific words. What he heard was the acceptance, the recognition, the understanding that he had been searching for his entire life. When the judges finally sat down, David looked at Miguel with warm eyes. Where do you go from here? He asked. Miguel thought for a moment. He looked down at the tabla in his hands, at the patterns his grandmother had painted so lovingly. He thought about her sitting in their small apartment, listening to him practice, never once telling him to choose, never once suggesting he should be anything other than exactly who he was. I go home, Miguel said softly. I tell my grandmother what happened here today. And then I keep making music. Because this is not about winning or losing. This is about showing people that there are no limits to how we can express ourselves. There are no rules that say we must be only one thing. We can be everything we are, all at once, and that is not just okay. That is powerful. The audience erupted again. The judges smiled and nodded. And Miguel Santos, holding his grandmother's tabla, walked slowly off the stage. The lights followed him until he disappeared behind the curtain, but the memory of his performance stayed in that room long after he was gone. Outside, through the tall windows, the afternoon sun was beginning to set. The light turned golden, then amber, painting everything in warm colors. And in that moment, in that space between day and night, something had changed. Not just for Miguel, but for everyone who had witnessed what he had done. They had learned that the most beautiful moments come not from choosing who we should be, but from embracing everything we already are. Miguel would perform many more times after this. He would travel and share his music with the world. But he would always remember this afternoon, this stage, this moment when he stopped trying to fit into anyone's expectations and simply became himself. Completely. Fearlessly. Beautifully. And that made all the difference.